So good evening, all the participants and our past executive member, Mr. Indranil Ghosh. Thanks for joining for this next episode of Friday Fundamental. As you know that this is one initiative which we Bombay Management Association had taken during pandemic, and we continue to have it. And we have been bringing variety of speakers from national and international repute and from diverse backgrounds, people who have done exceedingly well in their life, and they are here to share their experiences for the benefit of Bombay Management Association. The topics have also been starting from highly technical to more diverse and more human related. And today's topic is making change stick, which was very, I'm very curious to learn about this topic. And our speaker is our own Mr. Pramod Agrawal. Pramodji, we welcome you to this
Thank you.
program, and
Pleasure.
thank you very much for spending time for Bombay Management Association. We have people who are as young as management students to highly experienced people, and we also post all our videos and speakers deliberations on our YouTube channel for the benefit of our members. So it's my privilege to introduce Mr. Pramod Agrawal. Mr. Pramod Agrawal has over 30 years of experience in the management as a management of change practitioner, with 22 years in consulting experience in business transformation and managing change, and 8 years in managing large-scale and complex logistic operations. His core expertise lies in consulting business leaders to transform businesses and manage change, and coaching leaders on change and transformation. More specifically, his industry domains are quite diverse, starting from telecom to engineering, banking and insurance, FMCG, infrastructure, manufacturing, IT, education and research, logistics, and public sector. So many of the certifications, like Certified Change Management Practitioner from Prosky. He is a certified credentialed practitioner coach from the Coaching Institute, Australia. Uh, he is also a change practitioner from Atos University. He's a certified executive coach in Marshall Goldsmith Stakeholder Centered Coaching, which is an internationally acclaimed coaching practice. And he has also done management development programs for senior executives from SE, and also from leadership training at Leadership Institute, Memphis, USA. He has also been accredited in theory of constraints from TOC, ICO certified in TOC thinking process, and also in design thinking and process management, which is where he did certification in Siemens Process Management Program. He carries 22 years of ongoing experience in business transformation, management of change, leadership coaching, and he has done postgraduate diploma in planning, bachelor of technology from School of Planning, Ahmedabad. Mr. Agrawal is here to discuss today, you know, managing change stick. So, Mr. Agrawal, we welcome you to the program and hand you over the program for your thoughts. And we are
Thank
really
you so
excited
much.
to know, as I said in the beginning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's my privilege. And while you were reading, I was like, wow, I've done so much. So I'm very happy, thankful to BMA for giving this opportunity. And because like I was sharing just before we started the call, the vision of, or the purpose of the mission of BMA is to get better, as simple as that. And my intention of sharing today is with all the experience that I've gathered with, seeing leadership in action and seeing leadership in theory. And that's my intention to share here. I think so. With that, let me get started. Yes, the topic is quite interesting for me as well. Even now, it intrigues me how how change happens and how sometimes change failed, and sometimes some organizations are able to succeed. So I'm very happy to dive into that. So first of all, I thought, let me even clarify, what do we mean by making change stick? Managing change, we've heard quite often. What do we mean making change stick? So to give you a little bit, let me track back a couple of my experience and then come back to answer that, what I mean, and therefore uh, I'm just trying to paint a context in which this topic is there, and therefore you can appreciate the relevance of it. So like Mr. Rajesh was saying, I have 30 years of experience, which is primarily, of course, first 8 years in the logistics, but the remaining part in the business transformation and consulting and helping clients manage change, right? So what I want to do here is, during this time, I was counting last time like 60 plus organizations that I've worked with, and I've traveled to about 15 countries and worked with stakeholders for leadership positions or C-suite members from 25 plus last count, maybe now 30, 32, something like that. And when I look at kind of, or the number of leaders that I've worked very closely one-to-one, it'll be about 500 plus. And therefore, what I want to come back here in this session with you guys, and also invite you guys to then reflect back and see where your experiences are and maybe have an interaction. I would like to take away as well some lessons, and hopefully some lessons for the audience as well, right? So this is one side of my experience in which I could say that I've seen leadership in action. Yeah. And these are large corporates, global corporates, well-known corporates, leaders in their own market field, right? And the names you can see there. So this is one side of what my experience has been. And what I have done during this is direct interactions with them at multiple levels, right? And on the other side, so okay, this is how leaders do leadership. But what do theory say about what leadership should be and how organizations should be managed? So I also went through almost like a continuous education on how leadership is, what leadership is, how change is managed. So I went to some of the gold standards in the respective industries, something like ProSci, which is a gold standard in the change management, Marshall Goldsmith, executive leadership coach, and EDISC, which is a personality assessment and coaching leaders, and TOC ICO, which is right now expired, but I went through extensive TOC certification, and then it has become part of my DNA, I would say, although I don't hold the certificate right now. So with this, what I see is the second part of it is what is leadership in theory in terms of the models, the theories, the authors, what book talks about, what models are talking about, and what they should be. And the upper side is more how leaders lead today, right? And this is exactly what I want to share today, right? And if I put it, this whole thing in a very simple manner, this picture is very simple, but probably relate to every business, right? In the center, you see we have a business which we have a strategy, we have vision, we have a business model, we have structure, we have people work in a particular way with processes, etc. And we have technology and processes that, using all of these elements and the inputs from the supplies, we deliver to the customer. It's a very simplistic view of a business, but I guess this applies to everybody, every business on this planet, even nonprofit. And then I was reflecting, if this is how businesses are operating, what is changing around them? And so if you see, number one, I think all of us are aware of technology is changing rapidly. Probably rapidly is also a slow word, so to say, right? And so that is one area which is giving trouble, let's call it as simple as that. On the other side, I also see people demographics are changing, people psychographics are changing. Both are two different aspects. One is just demographics, which is data, which is profiling, but psychographic is what they expect, what kind of lifestyle expectations that they have, what kind of mindset that they have. All that is changing and therefore impacting businesses. How are they impacting businesses? Because I think businesses are not working or interacting with robots, they're working with people. So whether suppliers, whether employees, whether customers, all are people, and they are changing and their expectations are changing from the businesses, and therefore it is impacting businesses, right? The third element which you see on the top of it is probably enabled partly by technological innovations, partly by innovation just in pure thinking about how businesses can work and learning from it. It's what I'm lack of any other probably terminology is about more business model or thinking that is changing on that side, right? So this is all that is happening to every business that we have on this earth, right? When these things are changing, I think experts typically called it disruption. Very one word that describes everything that is happening and how the businesses are experiencing this, right? And if you see real life examples, this example it stands out every time to me. Very known company, and I'm sure most of you know this example. Uh, Nokia CEO, when he was ending, he really literally ended up crying that we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost it. Market leader, well-known company, a pioneer in their own industry, right at the time, and the statement says we didn't do anything wrong. So from a person at that high level and with that kind of view, say, but somehow we lost, which means they couldn't see what was coming, right? So that is the nature of this disruption that we're talking about. So this is one example, right? And he's not alone. There are multiple. I mean, I'm sure most of you would know various other names, but there are some examples that I want to show here. And all this I'm trying to share here is why making change take matters so much, right? Because if you see large organization, Netscape, we don't hear about it today. It's completely taken over by Internet Explorer and now Google Chrome, etc. Right? You've heard of Kodak disappearing from the. So I'm going to go a little fast because these names, the stories, most of the stories that the key message here is you have big names that all of us have heard, but they have disappeared from the landscape of business, right? So Nokia, another big name. Motorola, another big name, right? General Motors, very big name. I think we have a lot of leadership lessons coming. The erstwhile leader from General Motors, but it's disappearing, right? IBM lost its game because they couldn't catch up with the PC market changes which are happening, and they had to diversify and restrict themselves, I would say, to something else. Fair enough. Compaq lost. BlackBerry lost. Xerox, another big name, lost. Right? Enron, all of us know the story. Toshiba, limited space, though still existing, but at a point in time they were having a big hold on the market, but somehow lost a little bit. Right? So what does this tell us? Large organizations, and these are some examples. And if I do research and pull it out, there could be many more organizations which were just swept away by the changes that I talked about on the technology front, on the business modeling front, or customer expecting completely different from them, right? Broadly three categories, but it could be categorized into something more as well. And of course, when we reflect about it and look at this guy who said this, I don't know when, probably sometime 18th century or something like that, that it's not the strongest of the species that survive. It's not even the intelligent one. It's the one that most adaptable to change, right? And we know this. I mean, everybody knows this. Every leadership lesson talks about this. You need to adapt, but somehow a lot of them just couldn't see it. That is the nature of the beast that we're talking about when we talk about change, right? So changing one time is not a solution. It doesn't appear to be. I'm sure Motorola has innovated mobile versions of their phones, but somehow lost the battle, a longer battle. And similarly, Xerox, they have innovated their machines, but somehow lost the battle. So if I refer this back to or connect it back to what Simon Sinek talks about, that businesses are, their game is actually the infinite game. It's not a finite game, right? So the idea is to win that infinite game or be in the game longer. I think that is the game that we are talking about now. And if one has to be in that game long enough, right? What is the antidote? How do you make this change stick, right? Which means lasting. How do you make my organization, our organization, have some elements to it? How do I make this sustain? The forces that we're talking about, which are external to it, but impacting them very closely, right? So a short answer, which I will go into the detail, but solution discussions or brainstorming, I think what comes up is in this continuously and also rapidly changing, very disruptive times, there's an urgent need and also the capacity to continuously adapt, like Darwin said, right? There is no other way. If you stop adapting, I think that's your end beginning, right? So it should be part of the DNA, and it can only be part of the DNA if it is part of the culture, right? That is what I mean by making change stick. I'm not talking about so my intention of this webinar was not to give a change model, how to manage a change program, so to say. Let's say an organization is implementing cloud migration or SAP implementation, or they bought one company and merging it together, or they're restructuring, or they're going through a cultural transformation. That would be a one-time finite program. But my idea to bring this forward was that I think the game is a little longer. It's a long time, infinite game. Therefore, how do I make my organization, which is continuously adapting? That seems to be what Darwin said, right? So the title and the purpose of this webinar is that, and therefore I want to dive into that, right? So therefore, that takes me to another question, which is immediate one, that we know that change is continuous, change is rapid, change is in coming from all directions. We don't even know who's our next competitor is going to be, right? Next obvious question that came to my mind is, what makes it so challenging, right? So let's understand what is the current reality, right? How organizations are operating and what kind of response are they getting or reactions are they getting, right? So let's go back. Let's recall. Yeah, I think Khushbu, you raised a hand. If you have a question, you can let me know. You can put it in the. So let's recall this picture that you remember, right? Which is disruption. We talked about these three changes, the pace at which they're changing, the scale at which they're changing. There is no direction, right? Of course, experts know it. We all know it. This is popularly called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous situation in industry. If not, I'm sure when you Google about VUCA, you will get probably millions of hits and you can find about it. But for those, if you have not heard of VUCA, it's interesting. It'll be recommended to go and do some study about it. But experts, in short, call these times as very volatile, right? I think I have some details about what each of these mean as well, just for the benefit of if you are not familiar with it, right? Something which is constantly evolving, constantly changing, unstable at all, that is volatile and uncertain. We don't know, we cannot predict it. Right? Complex meaning it's not clear. The relationship is not clear between cause and effect. What is causing what, right? One of the example that comes to my mind right now when I talk about that is customer could be your supplier as well as, or a competitor could also be your customer and collaborator at the same time, right? That's how the world is changing. Also very ambiguous, right? And apart from these changes, what also I want to add here is COVID has also changed the dynamics of the industry or the businesses permanently, I would say, right? and that adds to the factors that we are experiencing. Right. So how are these forces that we talk about are affecting organizations, and how are organizations responding to it? That's then the next question. And if you remember, typically organizations are structured in a particular way: top management, middle management, frontline, and operational staff. Right. And it really came from industrial era. The design was that mostly the strategic topics are from the top management or part of the top management role, and mostly day-to-day functions like delivery to an order from the customer is the frontline operative. The very broad role categorization, but I think it's good enough for the argument that I'm presenting here. Right, that's the design was. And then VUCA hit. When VUCA hit, we have customers who are asking for something new request, right? They wanted a product differently. They wanted a product faster. They wanted different quality. They wanted probably an additional service elements attached to the product if you were selling, right? So they were asking for more from less, and there was no new competition, right? A customer would ask, okay, your product or service can do this, but something else like this can also do this, and completely different parameters, and so you come up with a new competition really, and the customer would have tried if you're not able to satisfy. So those are the key changes, some of the changes that I mentioned. And what happened because of this, right? The frontline or the operatives could not handle this, right? Because all these new requests they were not part of that. The organizations were not designed for it. Their roles were not designed for it, and everything therefore moves up. Right. This is one of the one of the factors or phenomena that I notice in most organizations. Right. Most of the CEOs or C-suite or even middle management or the top management layers a lot of their time goes in firefighting, crisis management, escalation management, and addressing new needs of the customer. Right? This is where I've seen one of the way the VUCA is affecting organizations. Their protocol is disrupted. The way they were supposed to or designed to work is completely changing. Right? So if I put that in a cause and effect, too many changes at the bottom of it, frontline employees cannot handle it. Too many exceptions, too many escalations, top layer are pulled into the day-to-day because the bottom layer cannot handle those questions, right? Which is therefore disrupting legacy structure, the design. An important part to notice here is if the top management is more involved in the day-to-day, they were not involved in the strategic topics. Right, so they were more into that. I have several CEOs and MDs. One of their pain areas was that I have a project sitting on my table, but I haven't been able to touch on it since 3 months because other things occupy my time. Right, so this is one of the important phenomena that I've noticed how VUCA is affecting organizations. Right, and when VUCA hit organizations, which is completely volatile and uncertain, unstable kind of situation, I think the imperative that most of the consulting companies offer to the companies to create stability. We need to create a sense of certainty. We need to provide some kind of simple understanding of this complex thing that is happening to people so that they can make sense of this complexity. So get some kind of clarity and provide some kind of clarity so that panic doesn't hit the organization and people are not confused, right? Because in uncertain and unknown territories, people get confused, people get very anxious, and people would have a lot of questions. If there are no answers, they are very unsettled. And in that mode, they cannot operate properly. So this was one of the imperative. So what I've noticed is in most of the organizations, the priority is let's get some stability on the financial health. Why financial health? Because also, if the financial health or the financial numbers are not met, they have an immediate impact because stock markets or the financial markets react very quickly onto that. Right? So that became ultimate priority for a lot of organizations. Right? So therefore, secure top line, secure margins, show growth, whether sell stake or acquire new customer or new companies. So you've seen this tendency of survival fast, get the numbers, get the top line, get the margins, get my financial in healthy status, right? Retain my customers. That was another theme for a lot of organizations. Manage productivity, manage efficiency, and definitely a lot of companies I would not say the companies were only engaged with the first two topics I'm talking about, but there were companies who were involved in innovation and transformation, but a lot of them were reactive to it, right? Only when it is necessary, when the customer is asking, and things like that. Very few companies were proactive. Also, I won't deny that there were no companies which were completely not proactive on it. There were few, but very few. So this is what also another parameter or another way VUCA was affecting organizations, right? Their behavior was changing, their decision was changing. If you look at some of the acquisitions I talked about, maintaining the top line, if it is not coming from the existing product line or the service line, what do? Buy companies, right? Which is what we have noticed in most companies, a lot of companies rather. I've just circled the acquisitions that I've captured from some of the examples. IBM 195, Google 244 acquisitions, right? Oracle 129, EY, Microsoft, large numbers, Nestle, right? Deloitte, right? So if you see, a lot of companies did a lot of acquisitions during that time. I'm sure each one of you are aware of many acquisitions, even your company or wherever you're working has done or being acquired by another company, right? In my experience, my company was acquired like 3 to 4 times in the last 10 to 15 years, right? So another phenomena that I've noticed is financial focus is imperative. It's important because survival is necessary. If we survive, then financial market will react to us positively, or we are fine. Otherwise, we are in danger, right? It could even quickly lead to bankruptcy. So there were also real threats if we don't focus on financials. That was financial focus. But there was a downside to it. It was not that if you just keep your focus on financial, everything would be fine. I think you have seen these are the numbers from some of the very popular reports on people's side. What happened to the engagement levels of people in most companies, right? Take, for example, here, 85% of the employees are not engaged, which is one of the famous Gallup study showed. Korn Ferry, also the same thing, 30% of the 33% only, right? So you take HR Katha, you take SHRM, you take any of the popular HR or people focused research, you get these numbers, right? That people were disengaged. And you can see even today, you from your own personal experiences, apart from being disengaged, I think what we see now is also quiet quitting. I'm sure everybody must have heard about it. And phenomena like this, right? So this is another way companies are getting impacted, which are probably the after effects of it or side effects of this VUCA, but it is an effect of VUCA, right? So let me put this back into the picture as well. Too many changes, people, which is also, if you notice, demographics are changing, psychographics are changing, their expectations are changing. They expect clarity now. They want, they're not as patient as their predecessors. They want flex, they want autonomy, they want growth, etc. And they are okay to jump, right? There is an attrition that we notice. Layoffs are happening. Almost low or no loyalty mindset or culture is what we're getting into, which again, if that is what is happening, it demands too much of focus from the top management. So this is another big area where VUCA is affecting organizations. So let's get moving. What happens if you have a disengaged workforce? Execution is not as good as you want. It's half-hearted at best, right? If half-hearted execution is happening, what a customer is going to experience is not an extraordinary service. It's going to be probably mediocre or average kind of service, right? Sometimes you might be lucky to get a great service, but broadly, if the workforce is 1/3 or 2/3 of your workforce is disengaged, you cannot run the organization with just 1/3 engaged employee. You're going to, on an average, have half-hearted execution, mediocre customer experience. And of course, this is going to create pressure on the financial market, financials of the organization in terms of profit and growth. right? So this was happening. This is another, and I have collected what customers or companies are experiencing, and these are some of the examples of what they say, that we are experiencing low productivity, we are experiencing that we get, it's very difficult to find customers, manpower is overloaded, we have regular delays to our order deliveries, unhealthy financials, high attrition, ineffective leadership, poor marketing, no communication, mediocre product. Our product has been same. We are not changing much, and things like that. And a list is large, but I thought I'll share some of the examples here. And this is what a CEO is experiencing, or the top leadership of the organizations are experiencing, right? So let's add to this canvas of what CEOs or leadership team is experiencing because of VUCA. On the left, you will see that customers, when they're demanding more from the less, customer attrition is happening if you're not able to meet, right? And which is creating pressure on the financials and the even survival of the business, which means if the financials are getting under pressure, top management need to attend to that, right? The product and services lifespan is shortening because new products are coming, which are probably making your products obsolete or less valuable for the customer, which means there is an increased need or a pressure from the customer or the market or the competition to innovate, right? Which means there is an increased demand to invest in innovation. Innovation just cannot happen in vacuum. Investment in money-wise, resources-wise is required for companies to innovate, right? So that also, again, if there is a demand for innovation, put money in that. Look at this canvas. Everything is really demanding the top management attention urgently, and more management focus is required. Your top management is increasingly involved in day-to-day operation, trying to put out fire, crisis management, and trying to solve urgent issues. That is what the company is experiencing because of this VUCA, right? When I look at this, this bull ride, this is how I think the CEO must be feeling like, right? It's difficult to stay in that position and hold and keep riding. And because you see what we saw just now, the air is getting hot and it's rising to the top of the bottle, where the bottleneck is conflicted because there are so many issues require their attention. It just slows them down. So what I've seen is multiple examples. In short, it's not working. Their strategy is not working. So what do we learn from this? Probably some of these lessons is what we can take away to make change stick. And some of these lessons, and after that, I'll also elaborate on some other additional elements that we can take care of, right? So how are organizations responding? Probably wrong question. I think they're reacting. They're not responding. It's not a response. It's just I have urgent issue here, urgent crisis here, urgent conflict with the customer or the vendor or the employee or the money. I'm just reacting, right? Because it's volatile, I need to be stable. Because it's complex, can I make it simple? It's a very reactive strategy that they adopted. Right. So lesson one, I would say, is reacting isn't enough. It's leaving it to chance. I think like the first habit of Stephen Covey, be proactive, you are in the charge. I think that is the direction we need to think. And that is where the solution is for antidote to VUCA, right? So let's explore that in slides later. Other one that we need to survive now, because if we don't survive this quarter, when we submit our financials to the markets, we want markets to respond positively. That's not working either. Or focusing on existing products and services isn't enough. Right? Not in sync with people focus is also not working. Right? Though financial is the goal, but excessive focus on that cannot be coming to organizations at the expense of people engagement or people being inspired to work there. So that's another key lesson I think we should draw from this. Right. So if you see, there are too many variables which are at play of on and working on a business as a system, right? Which makes it complex. And traditionally, what is seen or what is experienced is people should, if there is a complex system, the way to deal with this is break that down into simpler parts, analyze, improve, and manage each of those parts, and then we can manage. So that is one of the philosophy by which most of the organizations work in silos. Most of you would know that, and that's also not working unless they are synchronized. Managing parts by themselves isn't enough as well, right? That's another lesson that we take away from this, right? So how do you make change which sticks? We have some lessons, sure. How do we make it stick? How do we create change that that is a lasting, and how do you create a culture which is able to, or create a culture in the organization which is able to transform itself, adapt itself to the changes that they're experiencing in the external world, right? So I'm just recalling what we said as a short answer before. Bad news is, of course, there is no shortcut to this, right? Organization culture, I'm sure all of you on this call would agree, it cannot be created by just announcing something or doing something for a week or sending some emails over a period of next months or something like that. Organization culture cannot be created like that. So there is no shortcut to it, right? And what makes it even more difficult is whatever and however we have been operating today or in the past months or years adds to that. Even if you are doing something now, that is going to make it even more difficult. So that is the bad news, right? So it's like it is an infinite game. It takes a bit more effort. And one of the model that I have seen, the reason I'm saying this is because, like I just said, organizations have been working in a particular manner, and now they want to create a culture, right? A lot of them just start putting down action items that let's do this and let's do this and let's do this, and that will create a culture. And that doesn't work or did not work in a lot of organizations in my experience as well, because they are going into this new reality with the same mindset, yeah, with the same thinking, with the same beliefs. And unless you are able to or willing to challenge them, you cannot. So therefore, one of the model that I really like is this Kurt Levin's model of change. When he talks about when you want to change, you first must just unfreeze first. You cannot be retaining the old mindset, old beliefs, old ways of working, old principles, etc., or old policies as well, and then simply change. No, it cannot happen. You unfreeze, get out of, get rid of all those or some of those key policies which are coming in the way, and then change, and then refreeze, right? And unfortunately, what is also happening in our VUCA world, so to say, is I think the time between unfreeze and refreeze is so shrunk, so short, that it's typically unfreeze, refreeze, unfreeze, refreeze. That's how the cycle looks like, even for organizations. How do we create change? And when I've talked to multiple leaders and trying to come up with the solutions to it, I think what comes up is there are three elements to this culture, right? And change, we are all looking for a change, leadership, and culture. These three are so strongly related to each other that one is not possible without the other. We cannot think of making change without appropriate leadership. We cannot create a culture without leadership. We cannot have a culture without even change, right? So they're very strongly related to each other. How, right? We typically have organization blueprint, and based on which the leadership is acting or playing the role, right? And what they say, what they do, how their policies, decision making, what kind of choices they make, what kind of implementation that they do, all of that really create, or maybe not entirely create, but influence to a great extent the workplace conditions, right? And those workplace conditions then give employee an experience of how an employee feels in such workplaces, and depending on what they experience is determines what kind of outcomes that they are able to give. Like, for example, we saw if the employee is having an experience which makes him very disengaged and unconnected and not belonging to the organization, we cannot expect great outcomes from organization from employees like that. On the other side, if you have a very engaged employee, very actively engaged employee, you would see highly motivated, highly inspired, going out of the roles and doing extraordinary and delivering extraordinary customer experience and adding value to the customer as well as to the company then, right? So the whole culture of the workplace gets dictated or defined or is a result of how leadership acts, and it could go both ways. It could go in a way or a type of culture which promotes change that we are talking about, or it could also promote a culture which is very sluggish and then going in a spiral downwards. Leadership, change, and culture go hand in hand, very strongly connected to each other. We cannot create a culture without leadership involvement and even bent of mind towards creating that culture, right? When I talk about leadership and creating a culture and creating an outcome that they're looking for, I always relate to one of the metaphor is an orchestra, I think, where various musicians are playing their own instruments, and exactly the same happens in the organization. Somebody is doing marketing, somebody is doing product design, somebody is doing supply chain, somebody is collecting money, somebody is just accounting money, and etc., right? But this is so relatable to organizations that unless all the parts of the organizations are in sync and playing like an orchestra, I think it cannot produce a great performance, right? So one of the important takeaway for leadership or imperative for leadership is that get your organization to perform in a synchronous manner. I think that is what the conductor does in an orchestra as well, right? So this is, so we talked about, we are looking for a culture that is adaptable and that is very critically or influenced by the leadership action. And one of the imperative for leadership is to create an organization or teams which are synchronized with each other, right? Of course, it takes, like I said, it's not a switch which one can switch on. So there is a model behind. You need to work on various parameters. What you see is a framework which help leaders to create organization which can create or be in that infinite game as an expert. So let me quickly go through the items here, and then I'll deep dive into two of the important ones that we're talking about, the performance and the people, because purpose and proposition, though related, definitely, but just give you ideas. Purpose, I think that is where we start. Lead with a purpose that binds the stakeholders passionately. Common purpose, I think common purpose is something, or common goal is something that works as a glue that binds the whole team together. So that is an essential. It has to be relevant, it has to be compelling, it has to also be ecological, right? So that is one element of leadership framework that is imperative for leader. Let's go to the top one, the performance, or let's go to the proposition, then we'll go to the performance and people. On the right side, lead with an inclusive win-win proposition. when an organization has a purpose, it is creating something, it has a proposal for a customer that this is what it adds to the customer as a value. So the value has to be a win-win, and all the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders here, it has to be a win-win for customer, it has to be a win for employee, it has to be a win for even shareholders, which means the people who hold the shares in the company. So all the stakeholders, it has to be win-win. So that should be the proposition. Two essential pieces. Now the top and bottom: performance, lead. Of course, all this cannot happen. Let me go to the people first, right? When you have a common goal defined, when you have a proposition which is valuable for all, which is also strategic in nature and it's quite unique, and that gives you an edge over others. And you need to lead yourself as a leader and the self with that values that builds a trust and belongingness. When I say that, that is what brings them together as a community, and that is what gives them a culture, or rather creates a culture. And that culture, when it is performing well to the purpose and it's getting a win-win for all the stakeholders, it's also serving or delivering fulfillment rather, right? So people aspect quite important. Let's look at the top quadrant here, right? We can do all of that, but like we saw, if we focus too much on people, I think you need a balance as well on the performance side. Then you'll not be able to deliver. If you focus only on the performance, financial performance that we saw, most of the organizations are experiencing disengaged workforce. So what we need is a balance. Like imagine these as 4 important elements or balls that leader is juggling, right? All of them are important. One is not more important than the other. Right? So performance, which I talk about a CX score, which is towards the customer, a customer experience score, which has to be an imperative or a metric that they should monitor. The second important one is EX score, which is more an employee experience score. I have an example, I think, in the coming slides of what could be an employee experience score look like. And the third one is a management experience score, which is more a shareholder experience score, right? So these are the 3 key stakeholders, and the organization as a whole need to deliver that experience, what is expected from these stakeholders. So like I said, I'll go to the people and then go to the performance, and probably we may have to skip the other 2, but you get the gist of what I'm talking about. So I think one of the core principles what create culture for lasting change is, like I said earlier, while financial is definitely an end goal or an outcome that we want out of business because we are not in charity, but I think the main distinction or key difference that we need to take note of is that cannot be the starting point. I think the mistake a lot of corporations did is became a starting point, that we need top line, we need margins. Every project, every resource level, if you're looking at profit first, then you're not looking at people first, right? Although you want that, but that cannot be the starting point for making a lasting change. You need to work on people metric. I'll come in a minute what I'm talking about as people or experience, employee experience metric as an example. You have a purpose, you have a proposition, and you have an execution for this. The resistance for change is only going to come from people. It's not going to come from machinery. People would want to know what's in it for them. I think they would change only if they see what's in it for them, and then only they can make up their mind to change. So that's very critical piece. I think a lot of the organizations have missed the game because of this one single element. They have not taken their people first or putting people first, right? Because anytime you're bringing a change to the organization, people will have questions. Why are we doing this, and how different will this be? People have questions simply just to understand why. That is the first thing that comes to a lot of us. Any change that you want to do for tomorrow, let's say why are we doing this? So people have questions. That also is confirmed by research also. uh, Cotter, who is one of the change experts, says these are the four elements: self-interest, misunderstanding, low tolerance for change, and different assessment of the change, different perspective of the change. That why change this? Why not change it that way? Right. So these are the four elements which are primarily people related. That unless they understand this, people are not going to be part of the bandwagon or part of the change, right? So therefore it is very important to be to people, to put people first, and though for this the financial gain at the end of it, but that cannot be the starting point, because emotions drive people and people drive performance, right? As simple as that. You cannot go to performance without people. As yet, maybe in the future some industry will completely worked out by robots, maybe, we don't know. But right now, as long as your business is dependent on people, I think people would drive performance unless they are totally engaged and with the company and understand why we are changing this. So this is an example of, I wanted to share that, of a cultural transformation. How can a company, what kind of action plan can a company come out with, or a roadmap come out with, to transform their culture? And this came as an output from a series of workshops with the leaders, with the employees, spread over different locations. And I thought, let me share that as an example. I think transformation, cultural transformation especially, can be at three levels. One is the leadership and the team bonding and the individual change, right? A different hierarchy level, right? And of course, for the leadership, it is to build the trust in the leadership. For team, it is having that cohesiveness, having that bounding, having that environment, very important, belongingness. And for individual, recognition, significance, and growth, and personal development. Those were the key parameters. Therefore, three different dimensions came. And you can see some of the actions here. For leadership, for example, show up regularly, listen to them, make them feel heard. Make them feel heard, meaning make the people feel heard. So these were some of the actions that came up, and with a cadence to each of them, that is what became a cultural transformation roadmap for them, or action plan for them. So why I wanted to say or show this or share this with you is, like I said, cultural cannot change overnight, cannot change over weeks, cannot change over months, but it can change through consistent actions. And this is a great example of such actions. One, leadership, at leadership level, what they can do. For team bonding, what they can do. For example, uh, what came up during those discussions is ritual for good workplace vibe, that we belong. There is an energy, with even physical reminders for things like that, with branding and picture wall and who is who, so that people know each other. And what stood out for me is one of the action item that was recognized during this was also that, why don't you have a knowledge sharing or a shout out kind of ritual, that anybody is able to shout out, anybody is able to do a very localized TED talk like thing event. When somebody says, I have a customer issue and I've resolved it, I want to talk about it in the next TED talk like session. That was so powerful, because people could change. That became a platform for experience sharing. That became a platform for people to look up to. Yeah, what am I solving today? Can I go to that platform and share with them? I talked about, when it comes to performance as part of the leadership framework, one of the important thing is EX score. Right? And this is again one example of a typical employee experience score that is developed with the leadership, with the employee. And if you see, there are 5 parameters that they came up with, that they're looking for meaningful work, they're looking for cultural and practices which are benefiting them, They are looking at learning and growth. They're looking at trust in leadership, and they're looking at a workplace, physical workplace, more or less, right? And if you see meaningful work, example is do what you love. Can I do what I love in my workplace? Do I have autonomy? Is my work fulfilling? Is my work financially rewarding? Is my work inspiring? These were the 5 parameters that came from the employees, that this is what they would like to see if their work is meaningful. And this, similarly, from all these parameters, what became as a questionnaire for people to take survey on, which they could take every quarterly or every half yearly, depending on how the organization wants to decide, and set up benchmarks and measure this. So this became a great instrument for leadership to drive change, to create a culture where people have meaningful work, people have culture, people experience that culture, where they're living by values, where their inclusivity is there, there's a collaborative work culture, and they're progressive, and they're facilitating the well-being. Right? It's, of course, the parameters that you see are very relevant to that kind of organization. But if you do such a probably work with another organization, parameters could be slightly different. The workforce might be looking at something else apart from workplace, for example. Right? But I wanted to share an example of what an EX score and how it can be derived. It's clearly measurable. All you need to do is define that, measure it, do surveys, and monitor it. I mean, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. That's a very popular belief and management philosophy. So the same principle is applied here. Right? So once you drive engaged workforce and that score is going up, and you can do this at a team level as well, you can drill it down, you can drill it up to the organization level, and then the others, you will see the cause and effect happening for once the score starts going up, it can lead to effective operation, exceptional service, and profitable growth. You can see that relation also very, very easily. Right, so which is part of the performance that I talked about on the top quadrant here. So if you see EX score in the center of the performance block, that was an example here. I think this is my last element here. What I have seen, another thing when it comes to performance, is most organizations measure their current performance, which is what you see in the green box here. What is my current top line? What is my current operating expenses? What is happening in my current business, right? Policies, processes, metrics, all about current business. Most of the organizations, I have not seen any organization which is measuring a future business, which is on the right side. So there are some examples here, which again came from another customer engagement, that they wanted to measure innovation as well, apart from their current sales targets and margin targets, in terms of what value are they generating, which is additional to the customers. Right? How are they changing in terms of their competitiveness? How are they changing in terms of the cost? And how many policies, how many structure changes, how many metrics are they changing and challenging and reinventing? So these became some of the metrics that they wanted to create and measure. So this is, I think, one of the important element every organization can institutionalize in them. Apart from measuring current business, measure your future business as well. The parameters that you decide could be slightly different from what you see on the screen. This is from another organization, but if you measure it, I think it gets managed. Right? That is what we're talking about. If you recall Nokia CEO crying, there were no measures which were measuring how well are they moving forward in their future business. There was nothing like that. Of course, they're measuring current business. Most of the organizations that you saw, names that we saw, were only managing current business. And current business in the VUCA time, somehow suddenly another competition from nowhere appears and your product become obsolete and your current business is gone. right? That's how abrupt, that's how very accidentally it happens. So this is, I think, one more element that I wanted to introduce to which can greatly change the workplace culture in organization. A couple of other, let's say, frameworks one can use. Performance, for example, of an organization. Organization is a change, which means dependent elements, and the performance of the organization dependent on the weakest link, exactly like the chain. And there is a method of a focus method called focus 5-step process. I'll quickly run through it. If the weakest link determines my performance, then find the weakest link, that is part of F, then optimize it, because if you optimize that link which is weakest, then the strength of the whole change will go up, otherwise not. Collaborate everything around it to support that weakest link, and then that will uplift the system and start again. So it's a very cyclable, I'm not getting the word, it's a very iterative process of improving the performance. Exactly the same thing that you can do in the customer experience and employee experience and management experience. And then I would say growth is a journey, and like Simon Sinek says, more an infinite journey. I'm happy to take any questions if you have.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful presentation, Moji.
Thank you so much.
I mean, very insightful, I will say, giving the holistic view also. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah,
I will
I'll
invite.
share one more thing. I think maybe not all of the audience were there when we were talking before the call, while
Yeah,
I was preparing for this to compress my experiences. I thought of probably doing an MDP would just do justice to this topic,
perfect.
and therefore I may have rushed through a lot of stuff. I may have, because of this 1 hour, but I'm happy to do an MDP, and I'm happy to answer any question right now for this time.
Sure. Audience, if there are any questions, we really welcome. You can raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask. We have highly experienced people like Mr. Pramod on the call, or any of. I have a few thoughts. You have discussed lot of things. So, if you can share some of the organizations which have really worked on making this change stick and they have successfully transitioned, that will be really helpful.
Lovely.
And
Good
how they
question.
did it, what
Yeah.
what worked for them.
Yeah. Great question. Great question. And I was hoping somebody would ask this question because, like I said, keeping an organization alive and ticking in an infinite game. And if I can use a metaphor of, we want to maintain fitness, right? And to maintain fitness, we go to the gym, right?
Yeah.
And exactly like that, organizations want to remain fit and healthy, and uh, they start some change programs for that. They do some change, of whether they restructure, whether they have a new technology and things like that. So once they have done that, right, I think that doesn't stop their journey. And if they do not go to the gym, if they do not, they would fall back. So therefore, it needs to be a culture which needs to be driven by the leadership on a sustained basis, right? And some of the instruments that I shared in that the blue framework that I shared about leadership, performance, I think, is one of the key performance metrics that you have about employee experience is a key. For example, just one example, one of the parameter of how our organization is sustaining change, or how the culture is, right? So one of the parameter is culture, if you see in the employment, and it also came in the management experience scorecard that I've not shared here in this. But for both these both these stakeholders, employee as well as the management or the shareholders or the board, culture of the organization was one of the important parameter. And if you manage that, keep managing it, measuring it, improving it, that's the way to sustain that change. There are few organizations who have done that. There are few.
Yeah. Yes, Pramodji.
Yes,
And
Farokji, you have a question.
I think, Pramodji, if you can, share your thought or your experience, or you want to ask any question, you are welcome.
Sure. Thanks very much, Pramodji. Very kind of you for the kind words. So, Mr. Agrawal, this is another Pramod, and
Yes,
I think this is your day, and I will only share my, question and a few observations. So, like you said, and first of all, my compliments. The clarity and the comprehensive treatment of this somewhat fuzzy topic, if I may say. I'm really impressed the way you have articulated it. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Like you said early on, one of the major reasons why organizations are struggling with the VUCA, even though it has been around for a couple of decades now, is because the front line is not, you use the word, their roles are not designed for it. But if I put it a little more simply, they're not enabled and empowered.
Absolutely right.
To be responding to some of the things that are, they are being bombarded with.
Yeah.
Now, let's say in the last couple of decades, the need to redesign these roles is obvious. The need to enable and empower this layer is obvious, and you have articulated it so beautifully here. But, why is it that we still have exceptions than a norm in terms of organizations that have managed to do it? And is it a capability issue? Organizations are not able to see that it is very important, or is it a mindset issue of, every layer trying to secure their own position, rather than looking at the larger goal of organization and the interest of that, giving away a few, authority positions and decision-making powers, etc. So my hunch is that it is more mindset issue than so much of the capability issue. But I would love to hear your thoughts from the experience.
Yeah, another great question, quite deep. And my experience or my thinking on that is probably challenging for a lot of leaders, because what I've seen is that leaders really make or break organization in principle, right? At the top, when I say leader at the top, the captain of the ship, make or break the organization's trajectory in a time frame, right? And what I've seen is the tenure of that leader, right, is not infinite. And they tend to look at the performance, and they tend to prove themselves as a good performer, good, a success during their tenure. So in that mindset, they might take decisions or they might not take decisions, which does not serve them. So I think it's a conflict of to look out for themselves or to look out for an organization or a ship, which probably I'm not going to captain it after 3 years or after 5 years. But I think that is where my experience says probably the issue is.
Thanks very much. I tend to concur with it. So which means the only hope is that if the board itself has such a long-term horizon, that you look at management performance not only from the current performance metric lens, but also the other dimensions that you put up, the
Yeah.
future, the innovation, what are you doing on all of those? I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
at the C-suite
Exactly.
level, this thinking may continue.
Right. 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 Exactly.
Yes. Thanks very much for your
Thank you
response.
so much.
Yes,
Great
and thank you,
question.
Sarmaji, for the opportunity. Thank you.
I see Sudesh
Yeah,
has
Mr.
his hands
Farooq
up.
Sidhwa was raising his hand, my colleague
Yes.
from L&T Days.
Hi.
Hey. Yes, sir.
My question is that most organizations which have failed were doing exceptionally well, both in terms of performance, people orientation, and culturally well off.
Yeah.
Also, you cannot say that they were oblivious to the competitors' challenge, yet they did not change. Why?
Great question. And I wish I could have an interview with that Nokia CEO to understand this better, right? Or any other CEO, the names that I have not access to. But I think one of my experience again is that it's the VUCA or the world is there's a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of unknowns, right? In that unknown, leaders only know what they know, and something hit them from the unknown. Probably they're not able to put a finger on what hit them hard, but something hit them hard anyway, definitely. And I have been part of organizations where they would go like, yeah, we are doing great. Every quarter the email is great. Every half yearly email is great. We are doing great. We are doing great. We are doing great. And then you're selling yourself off, right? At throwaway prices, and you're going to a company which is lesser known in terms of brand. And as an employee, one is not able to figure out, why is this change happening? Why am I going from a well-recognized, such a respected brand, common household brand, to another which is not yet known? No matter what the leadership answers gives me, the employee is not happy with it. They can see, because leadership is giving answers which are probably sometimes politically correct. So I think what they see, what they acknowledge, and they definitely have missed something, some signs, and they have not reacted in time. For example, I think to some extent, we know that Nokia did not react in time, and by the time they were gone.
If you permit, I can add something
Yes, please.
to this, whatever you have said. I remember a classical example of Sony Corporation, how over a period of time, the company has changed from mere electronics to media and whatnot, and from Walkman, how they have gone into different things. I read a book on Sony long back, which was by Akio Morita, who was once the chairman of Sony, and he had mentioned that when Walkman was a instant success when they launched, and on the fourth floor, the team was working. The team was launching the Sony, this Walkman, and on the sixth floor, another team was working how to kill Walkman. So that is the proactive thinking.
Right.
When I say
Yeah.
kill, means how to improvise on it. So, Mr. Farooq, I think that is one classical example to my mind, which comes how over a period of time organizations have survived and organizations have transformed and transitioned into the newer things, because the change is. Sudeshi, I think you have some question. If you can
Sir,
unmute.
I just have a very practical question because I have also spent about 4 decades in industry. So one thing that
Beautiful.
I find very difficult is, whenever there is a small, even an incremental change, the emotions run very high in organization. And unfortunately, the general tendency of most organizations is leave your emotions at home. Let us talk business here. And change, managing change. We talk of trust, we talk of credibility, we talk of empowerment and getting people aligned. And abhi bhi Saab ne bhi, Pramod ji ne bhi, emotions create drive. So the belief system ही ये बोलता है कि leave your emotions at home, and this is not the place for showing emotions. How can we really, because unfortunately all the examples that we find of change and all are mostly foreign examples, you know. I have not seen too many examples of successful Indian companies managing change using the models we just discussed. I would like the speaker to kindly throw some light on these concerns.
Yeah. See, what's coming to my mind, Sudeshi, is that let's take a CEO. In my experience, I think CEO wears two caps. One is a leadership cap, another is a management cap. Right? Like I think it was Peter Drucker who said this: we lead people and we manage tasks or outcomes, something like that. So these are the two caps that every CEO wears. And what I've seen in my experience is, of course, leading people is a complex task because people are complex. There are emotions involved. It's not easy, right? Managing tasks is easy. Managing results, KPIs, driving people to that performance is easy, right? So what I've noticed is a lot of leaders tend to play a lot of management cap, wear management cap, and keep the leadership cap out, is my experience. And therefore this emotion is, because if you're talking to people, if you are leader, your only priority can be leader. You only lead people, you don't lead machines, right? You operate machines, right? And that leading cannot happen without emotions. But in the guise of you being a CEO, which is called a leadership position, but they are actually managing. I think they are most of the time comfortable managing and showing results. Part of education, part of grooming, part of the culture, it could be multiple factors, which is okay with that. I mean, how many organizations measure leadership effectiveness as equally as your top line and profit line and margin?
Yes, sir.
Pramod ji, aapka mute hai, my colleague.
If you have a minute, I wanted
Yes,
to say something.
Sure,
of course.
Sure.
So, if we take an example of somebody closer home, Mr. Harsh Mariwala, I have had an occasion to host him as a keynote speaker where we requested him that, sir, you talk about how did you integrate, this, people and business outcome so beautifully. And I was just trying to connect with, what Mr. Agrawal was responding, because it came from his level, who was founder, CEO, and everything all rolled into one way back in early 90s when he carved out Marico from, his family, this thing. He made sure that he strikes this balance of these two caps that you're talking, the leadership cap and the management cap. You have to pay attention to management, otherwise it doesn't work. Not only that, he said, people, some of us, one of my colleagues asked him that, sir, how did you manage this, QSQT, quarter se quarter tak? Remember there was a movie, so he used that phrase, Qayamat se Qayamat tak, so he says QSQT. So how did you manage that? Something that you have also articulated. And he said, we used to engage with people who are writing about us, who are analyzing us. And if we had a plan that we are investing something which will show in terms of returns, maybe 2 quarters down the line, at least with the key people, important people, we will engage, and they were willing to understand. So it is about stakeholder management by the person at the top. And since the next line and the next line, they kind of emulated his behavior. Yeah. He was able to, some of the kind of foundational changes he initiated way back in early 90s, it is still an example that people have not been able to do today.
Yeah.
So like you rightly say, that if the person who is at the helm is himself fully convinced that this is the route to go, then everything else starts falling in place.
Yeah.
And I think we obviously have so much to learn from this company. The recent HBR has devoted a chapter on innovation and ideas, and they have written some 4-5 pages on how Marico from that commodity firm, so there is so much to learn. So what I was trying to suggest from the question that Mr. Sharma asked, that there are very few examples, but there are examples in our backyard who have managed to do it. And thanks very much, Rajesh ji, for allowing.
I don't know much, but what also gives me a hint that the Mahindra also plays that leadership role a little bit more. And if you see the commonality between Marico and Mahindra is the founder CEO.
Yeah.
And not the paid CEO on salary, and they therefore look at this as infinite tenure.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's their baby that they're grooming, and it's not a job that they're doing. Maybe it's coming from there.
I think that makes a significant difference. No questions about that.
Any other questions from anywhere? We welcome that. Thank you very much, Pramod Agrawal, for your contribution, and
thank you so much.
And Sudeshi. Any questions or any thoughts, we will welcome, because I think we have very experienced people on the call, and it's always good to share our experiences. And thank you very much, Mr. Pramod Agrawal, for a wonderful discussion and insightful sharing of the thoughts. We give you 3 cheers and 3 claps.
Thank you everyone. I think the interactions were like nice. I'm taking away also. Sure.
Yes, there are a lot of takeaways, and then we look forward to engaging with you on for other programs as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, Pramodji, Farooqji, Sudeshji, for sparing your time and attending this and sharing your thoughts. BMA keeps on conducting all the educational programs and bring very learned speakers to the table. We recently conducted one-day workshop on digital leadership transformation in collaboration with IIT, and now the next one we are having on HR. So BMA HR conference we are conducting in collaboration with IMT Nagpur. This is in a hybrid mode, and the physical event is going to happen at IES Bandra on 9th and 10th of February. So my request to all of you is, please register for the program and attend this. I can assure you, you will have a lot of learnings to take back. All the CHROs and HR heads of top corporations of the country are spearheading many of the discussions. Mr. Shiv Kumar is the keynote speaker for the conference. So we look forward to meeting you in that conference. So thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and have a good weekend.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Happy weekend. Happy weekend.
Yeah.